All right, this one's for you.
For me, huh?
Yeah. Okay. So I feel like we've maybe talked about this before, but maybe not.
Okay.
So why does the church hate talking about this?
Okay.
Like,
so I'm now the spokesperson for the whole church.
Right.
Okay, got it.
Why? Like this episode's going to lose us followers.
Okay.
Why?
I hope we'll probably lose some and gain some.
Right.
So we'll see what happens.
Yes.
But I understand the question of why would we lose followers for talking about sex or talking about lust.
Right.
Okay.
Like, what is it?
Yeah.
And why is it always the people with the most children that hate talking about this?
Right.
Right?
Okay. So
it's always old people, and they had 48 kids. And they're like, let's not talk about, like,
right,
what? And like 1 million grandchildren.
Right.
Like, someone's doing it somewhere.
And apparently often.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I think for way too long, the church has just, I think they thought the very conversation of sex was wrong. Okay.
Okay.
So in other words, if there is a view of sex that sex is only about procreation, and you remove the part of it being pleasurable as part of being why God gave us sex,
mm-hmm.
then I think all you simply do is go the pleasure component wrong.
Because this, like the thoughts are the first things that happen.
Correct. Yeah.
When you're growing up.
Yeah.
And no one prepares you.
No.
Nobody tells you that's going to happen.
Right. No, I agree with you.
They just say, here's this thing. And they don't tell you that you're going to be thinking about it all day, all the time.
And that's all you want.
Right.
Yeah, I know. And so again, I think if the church's longstanding position has been sex is wrong,
mm-hmm.
or lust is wrong, we should not attach anything pleasurable to it.
Right.
It's just for procreation purposes. Then at that point, we don't want to have the conversation at all. That's what I mean. And then I think some church leaders are just too even afraid to talk about it.
Right. Because they'll lose followers.
They will lose followers. Parents will get mad. Grandparents will get upset, whatever.
But why is that?
And they're scared to talk about it.
That's what I want to know. Why? Like, what is it? What is it about these people that never want it mentioned? Like, why do we not want to talk about this thing that we all do?
Right.
And that keeps civilization alive.
Like, yeah, I know. It is strange, because you'd think that this would be one of the most normal conversations.
Right.
Because it's actually something that we all have in common.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like when my
it's
wife.
the only thing we have in common.
That's it. And so we have a very shallow friendship. And so, but like when I'm like my wife and I, when we start doing premarital counseling with a couple, like we're upfront with them. Hey, we're going to talk about sex.
That sentence, went a different direction than it sounded like.
Oh, okay.
My wife and I, when we start premarital counseling with someone.
Okay. Well, I'm staying with where I was going. All right. And so when we start premarital counseling with someone, like we're up front, like, hey, we're going to talk about sex. We're not afraid to talk about sex. We're unashamed to talk about sex. Sex is a good and holy gift given to us by God, so it needs to be talked about. Okay. But I do think that what you're getting to is even more deeper than the idea of the act of sex, because you're dealing with, like, we're talking about lust here. We're talking about thoughts, emotions, things that happen in us as, when we enter into puberty,
right?
That's occurring way before acts of sex.
Right.
And we don't talk about that either.
No.
At all. And I think it's terrible that we don't.
Okay.
I think that we need to let our kids know. So this is like both from parents and from churches, right?
Right.
We need to let our kids know.
But we've talked about this before. What I want to know is why, if you started talking about it,
I gotcha,
people would be upset.
I think some of it, and this is weird to me, Nate, because I think there's some of it that is like, we would call it being prudish or whatever. Like, we just don't talk about those kind of things in church. Like, and I guess that's part of what I'm talking about. Like, if you view sex as, you view sexual desire as something that's just all the time unholy,
right?
All the time not good, even in marriage, like much less outside of that. If it's something that we can't get our heads around, that God actually designed us to have sexual desire. Like, if we can't get our head around that, and we think it's unholy, like every part of sexuality is unholy, then we're going to never want to talk about it. But what's weird is the grandparents now, like that generation, that's sexual revolution generation.
Right.
Like, they should be the ones screaming from the rooftops of why we need to be talking about this. You know?
Yeah.
I don't know if I even want to know what you're thinking. All right, so, but like, because I think they could speak to the reality of it, of the sexual desire, but also the consequences of that sexual desire when not quote unquote governed by God's law and by God's, and I say law, by God's ultimate plan and design for us to engage in sex in the context of marriage. And so, or only in the context of marriage. And so, and then their children weren't taught it either.
Nope.
And so, for example, I do this, we have this program in our church on Wednesday nights. We call it Conversations with Scripture. And so we do this thing called Conversations with Scripture, and we take parts of Scripture, or we'll have a theme, talk about that theme, and then we'll go through Scripture to find out what does Scripture actually say about this. Well, one of the things that we have talked about lately is the actual sexuality, and
nobody comes.
Oh, they all come. And so, but they I think there's a generation that realizes it needs to be talked about because they didn't hear it, and the generation before them didn't talk about it, and so but they want something different for their own kids. And so I think that there is a generation, like I'm like in my early 40s or mid 40s, and I think there's a generation like my age younger that do want to talk about it so that there is not all this inappropriate or unnecessary, negative stigma attached to sexuality and sexual desire. And so I think that when you're talking about lust specifically, like, it needs to be understood that we're wired to have sex, and to have sexual desire. And then to talk, with young people, if we're talking about young people in particular here, as they're going through puberty and their teenage years, how do we deal with lust? Other than don't have sex.
Right.
Because that's just terrible.
And never think about it.
Yeah, and because that's just unrealistic.
All right, well, when you do a series of sermons about lust and sex and all that, just let me know when, because I want to be there for every week, and I'm going to sit in the back and watch everyone be uncomfortable.
That's what your goal is?
Yes.
Okay. It's I'll let you know.
Okay.
We've got a series coming.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
also, I've heard from pastors that whenever they do talk about this, that it's really hard for them to not make innuendos on accident and have everyone laugh at them.
Okay.
Because it's totally happening.
Right.
So is that something that you've ever experienced? Like when you're doing premarital counseling or something, and they just start laughing and you don't realize why they're laughing, and it's because you made a sex joke while talking about sex and didn't realize it?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I don't know. That doesn't bother me though. Like it doesn't bother me. Yeah, it doesn't. I guess that wouldn't bother me. Because
I'm not saying it bothers you. I'm just wondering if they laugh at you sometime.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
Okay.
I'm sure people laugh at me. Right. And I think some of the times the laughter is also because they're uncomfortable.
Right.
In that situation, having their pastor talk to them.
Right.
Yeah.